Hello everyone and welcome back to another video here at the N10 Hockey channel. In today's video we have a couple of things to discuss, including a couple of signings and a couple of trade rumors involving the Winnipeg Jets, Calgary Flames, and Florida Panthers. We'll do all that coming up right now. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video here at the N10 Hockey channel. Now, before I get to the signings that have happened so far this week, I just wanted to go with a quick channel update. So there's going to be a little bit of scheduling change for next week. Like I said, we're probably going to have a couple of small videos throughout the week, given the fact that there's going to be some major trades throughout the week. But just to clarify, we're going to be switching our normal videos. So instead of having every video Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, like we've been usually doing, we're going to switch it up a little bit next week. We're going to have our first video Monday next week, so definitely stay tuned for that, 2 days before the draft day. Then we're going to have our second video on Wednesday, and that will be the draft video. So remember, at 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern time, definitely tune in for my live draft coverage where I give you my opinion of what happens with the draft on my channel. So definitely stay tuned for that. And then the third daily video of the week next week will either be Friday or Saturday. I haven't decided that yet, so definitely stay tuned for Monday or Wednesday. I'll definitely tell you when I'm going to be doing my next major video. But definitely remember, next week, instead of Tuesday and Thursday, it will be Monday and Wednesday. We have our main videos on the channel. So definitely stay tuned for that, and stay tuned for the draft coverage, as it's definitely going to be an exciting next week in the NHL. There's plans to be a lot of big action heading towards draft and free agency. So definitely, once again, stay tuned for the 4 p.m. Pacific draft day coverage that I have. And then also remember that the first video next week is Monday, not Tuesday. So stay tuned for that. But once again, we'll get back into the regular part of the video. We'll start with the signings that have happened recently. There's been a ton of signings. So we've got all the signings up until a couple days ago. So tons of signings here. We'll start with the lower end one. There's a lot more depth forwards being signed than the major forwards. We'll start with the Arizona Coyotes, who have brought back Steven Kampfer on a one-year deal. They'll have an AAV of $775,000, and they'll be going to start next year. Now, Kampfer is a veteran of a lot of NHL games. He's definitely played for quite a while. A couple of years ago, he wanted to take a break. He wasn't getting very many opportunities at the NHL level, so he went over to Russia in the KHL. He did solid, putting up 11 goals and 30 points in 46 games, and he was able to earn himself an opportunity in Detroit. The Red Wings would sign him. They kept him in their AHL affiliate the entire season. They would trade him just after a trade line as sort of like an AHL move. Moved him to the Arizona's affiliates. He did all right with Arizona, and the Coyotes now signed him to a one-year, two-way deal. So with the two AHL teams combined, Kampfer actually did quite well, putting up 6 goals and 29 points in 59 AHL games. So he still looks like a decent defenseman. Now, with the lack of contracts in Arizona, I could see Kampfer maybe be like a 7th defenseman, maybe 3rd pair defenseman. But if the Arizona Coyotes were to improve that defense a little bit in the offseason, I would expect Kampfer to most likely be once again a minor league forward who could definitely be a call-up option. He's still a solid forward, but he's more of a minor league forward now, in my opinion. So I would not be too surprised if Kampfer was more of a minor forward next year and not an NHL forward. But given the fact that he is on the Arizona Coyotes and they do have such a weak team right now, it would not surprise me at all if Kampfer does wind up being at least lower end NHL forward with Arizona. So not a big signing there, but a solid depth signing for the Arizona Coyotes to give them another contract for next year. The Buffalo Sabres signed Lukas Rousek to a 2-year contract extension out of average annual value of $775,000 until he gets the start of next year. Now, Rousek is one of the Sabres' better forward prospects, not the top-end prospects like a Kulich or an Ostlund or a Rosen, nowhere near that level, but he seems like a decent, pretty solid prospect. A couple of years ago, playing in Rochester, which is the Sabres AHL affiliate, he didn't put up too many great numbers, only got into 19 AHL games, putting up a goal and 4 points. But this year, he totally flipped that script on its head, putting up 16 goals and 56 points in 70 games, and definitely was a dominant player at the AHL level, and even earned a call-up towards the end of the Sabres season, and put up a goal and an assist in 2 NHL games. So definitely, he looked really good. I would expect Rousek to probably go back to the AHL this year, probably still continue his development. But I think in time, Rousek could definitely be like a solid third-line forward at the NHL level. So I think there's definitely a really good prospect here in Buffalo. Signing him to a 2-year league minimum deal is quite fantastic. And I think that was a really good move for them to continue to keep a prospect who I think has a future at the NHL level. So definitely, he showed it this year that he can be a very productive forward, and I can't wait to see how Rousek does going forward. Next, we have the Pittsburgh Penguins forward, Valtteri Puustinen. Now, Puustinen signed a one-year deal that has an average annual value of $375,000, and the deal will begin at the start of next year. Now, for Puustinen, a decent prospect for Penguins. Definitely one of the lower-end guys, nowhere near like a Samuel Poulin, but he's still a prospect who has maybe some NHL potential. He's definitely been doing pretty good at the AHL level over the past couple of years. 2 years ago, had a solid season, putting up 29 goals, 42 points in 73 games. This year, had a couple more goals with 24 goals, a ton more points with 59 points, and in one last game only getting into 72 games. So, Puustinen looks really good. I think at the NHL level, he could be a good bottom six forward, whether it be on the fourth or third line. He should be at the NHL level a solid fourth line winger. So, I definitely see that Puustinen has some NHL potential. Probably not a ton. But I could see him be like a 10-20 point bottom six forward at the NHL level. So I think the one-year deal for Puustinen is good. He seems like a decent prospect, and he's had some pretty good AHL seasons over the past couple of years. So at the very least, this gives the Penguins a depth, maybe even call-up option for their forward group. So definitely a solid sign for the Penguins, and hopefully in the future, Puustinen can be a solid NHL forward. Next, with the Tampa Bay Lightning, they signed left-wing forward Gabriel Fortier to a one-year contract extension of averaging a value of $775,000, and will begin at the start of next season. Now for Fortier, he's one of the world's better younger players. He's been doing pretty well over the past couple of years. Had 14 goals and 35 points in 72 AHL games a couple of years ago. Was able to earn a call-up towards the end of the season, and had a goal in 10 games. So definitely, he looked solid for the Bolts. He got into one game of NHL action for the Lightning this year, didn't put up any points, but then got into 67 AHL games with the Tampa Bay Lightning and had 11 goals and 29 points. He looked solid, so I think in time Fortier could definitely be like a third line forward for the Bolts. Probably not a high-end level forward, but definitely a solid bottom six forward for the Bolts. I think does have some NHL potential, so I definitely think that Fortier should definitely be a really good forward for the Bolts, and should definitely be able to challenge for bottom six role, especially with all of the players leaving Tampa this offseason. For the Columbus Blue Jackets, they signed right-wing forward Mathieu Olivier to a 2-year contract extension of averaging a value of $1.1 million, and the deal will begin at the start of next year. Now for Olivier, he was acquired last year from the Nashville Predators after having 5 goals and 11 points in 46 AHL games, plus 1 assist in 10 NHL games with the Preds the previous year. He got into Columbus, and he's definitely showed that he can be a solid fourth-line checking forward. He was able to put up 5 goals and 15 points in 66 games for the Blue Jackets, and looked solid for them. He was definitely a solid checking fourth liner until he got injured. So definitely, I think for the time being, Olivier should definitely be a good fourth line forward. He doesn't come at an overly high cap hit, and he can definitely be that solid checking forward that a lot of teams covet. So definitely, I think that's a solid extension for the Jackets, and Olivier should continue to thrive on the fourth line, probably still putting up between 10 and 20 points, but still, given the fact he was mostly an AHL forward the previous year, given the fact he was a solid NHL forward this year, it definitely shows a lot. I think he can definitely be a good fourth line forward again this year. Next, we have Samuel Bolduc with the New York Islanders. Bolduc is a solid left shot defense prospect for the Isles. He signed a 2-year contract extension of an average annual value of $800,000, and they'll begin at the start of next year. Now for Bolduc, he was more of an AHL forward 2 years ago, basically playing his entire season in the AHL. And he did alright, putting up 2 goals, 7 points in 57 games, which isn't too bad for one of his first pro seasons. But this year was a really good coming out party for Bolduc. He definitely did really great, a lot better than the year prior, putting up 10 goals and 35 points in 56 games. And with all of the injuries to the Islanders' decor, he was able to earn himself a call-up to the NHL level, and he did alright, putting up 2 goals and 3 points in 17 games, was a solid defender. So for the Islanders, I think Bolduc should definitely be an NHL forward at some point in time. It looks like he's a solid third-pair defenseman. Maybe could eventually be a second-pair defenseman, but for the time being, I think his projection is at least a third-pair defenseman. He's definitely showed he can work well. The Islanders are losing a guy like Scott Mayfield possibly in free agency this year, so they may have a third-pair opening in the roster. So guys like Salo, Aho, and Bolduc I expect to challenge for a third-pair spot. So I would not be surprised if Bolduc wound up winning one of those spots if they aren't able to find a third-pair defenseman to bring in. He's a solid third-pair defenseman, in my opinion, who I think should continue to develop at the NHL level now. So I definitely think Bolduc was a solid NHL pick a couple of years ago for the Islanders, and I think he's at least a third pair, if not a second pair of defensemen in the not too distant future. So definitely a solid sign to get him under contract for the next 2 years at close to league minimum salary. Next was the Buffalo Sabres. We saw a deal really like this a little while ago, but the Buffalo Sabres have signed Zemgus Girgensons to a 1-year contract extension of an average annual value of $2.5 million, and deal going to start of next year. Now for Girgensons, it's the exact same deal as Kyle Pozo. Once again, more of a veteran bottom six forward for the Sabres. Not going to put up too many points, but it's a solid player and a nice player to have around the locker room, especially for a younger Sabres team. Put up identical point totals these past couple of years. 10 goals, 18 points. 2 years ago in 56 games. This past year, 10 goals, 18 points in 80 games. So definitely, he's producing pretty well, putting up usually between 10 and 20 points. Like I said, he's not going to get you very many offensive numbers, but he's a solid bottom six forward, can help in the penalty kill, and is a good veteran player to have around the younger players. And once again, the Sabres have a ton of cap space available this year, so getting a couple of veterans signed on 1-year deals that are a little bit more expensive than other ones, I think is pretty okay for the Sabres. And I think both Girgensons and Opozo should once again be reunited on the fourth line for the Sabres. And I do like the signing for Buffalo, as it gives them another veteran bottom six forward to work into their lineup. And finally here with the biggest signing of the bunch here, in Sean Monahan. Now Monahan, who was definitely banged up this past year, has signed a 1-year, $1.986 million contract extension with the Montreal Canadiens, and he will be in at the start of next year. Now for Monahan, he was brought in last offseason from the Calgary Flames when they couldn't keep him anymore due to cap reasons, to Montreal, and he was looking like he could be a solid third-line center for the Canadiens, and he started out quite well after having injuries with Calgary and putting up 8 goals and 23 points in 65 games the year prior. He only got into 25 games before being injured this past year with the Canadiens in his first ever season with the Habs. And he put up a solid point total, putting up 6 goals and 17 points in those 25 games before being injured. So a lot of people thought he could be a trade chip around the deadline, but he was injured and there was not very many teams willing to pick him up. So the 1-year deal I think is really good for Montreal, with guys like Drouin leaving, Dadonov's already left, Hoffman's probably going to be gone at some point in the not-too-distant future. They're getting rid of a lot of their veteran guys, so getting one of their veteran guys back in Monahan I think is a pretty good deal. Monahan's, like I said, solid middle six forward. If he can stay healthy, he can probably be a 40 to 50 point player, but that's a big if given the fact of Monahan's serious injury history over the past couple of years. But I do like this deal. It's under $2 million, so it's not too expensive. Monahan can once again be a third-line center, and if he can stay healthy, and the Canadiens are once again trending towards being one of the bottom-dwelling teams in the NHL, the Canadiens could trade him. It's a really tradable contract. It's not like last year where they would have had to retain like half of his salary and only bump it down to like $3 million to make a trade work. I think a lot of teams would be able to take a $2 million Monahan at the trade line. So definitely, it's a really good deal. I think both teams really do like this, and I think Monahan should definitely help the Canadiens, at least at the beginning of the season, and then maybe if the Canadiens are not trending towards being a playoff team, they sell them at the deadline for a pretty good package. So definitely, I like this deal for the Canadiens as it gives them a veteran, it gives them a solid third-line center, and it gives them possibly another trade option at the trade deadline for the Habs. So definitely, I like this deal for both sides. I think that deal works out for each side. So definitely, good signings all around. Monahan in Montreal, solid signing. He should be a good middle six forward. Girgensons in Buffalo, once again, really good signing. Should be a good bottom six forward. Will Duke either this year or maybe next year. Should be a good third pair of defensemen in New York. Olivier, solid fourth line forward. Should definitely be a hard to play against forward for the Columbus Blue Jackets. Rusik, a solid prospect for Buffalo, who should be able to be a solid third-line forward in a year or two. Bustainen should be a good bottom six forward in a couple of years' time. Kampfer should be either a good depth forward for the Arizona Coyotes or maybe a good like 7th-6 forward for the Coyotes in this next year. Plus, Fortier, I think it has a possibility with the Bolts possibly leaving some more players this offseason to be, at the very least, a solid bottom six forward for them. So definitely some good signings all around, and I like how all these signings have done for these teams. Next up we have the news update, but there's not really much to talk about there. There were no signings since we last talked, no trades since we last talked, which is quite surprising in my opinion, given the fact this is usually a time we'd see a ton of trades. Going back a couple of years, I always found that it was usually right around 2 weeks before the draft that you usually start to see a ton of moves. We're less than a week away, and we've only seen those 2 big trades early in the season from Columbus when they acquired Severson and Provorov. So it's been a little bit quiet, but according to a couple of sources, it sounds like once the GMs start getting to Nashville and there starts to be some conversations there, we could see a ton of trades. So definitely, maybe not too much today, maybe not too much tomorrow, which will be Sunday. But it sounds like as soon as Monday hits, we could have a floodgate of trades to kick off what's going to be an exciting week with free agency and draft day both in there. So definitely, I think it's a really exciting time. And I think for sure we will see some trades, just not right now, possibly in the not too distant future. But definitely, I am a little bit surprised that we haven't seen too many trades, and I do expect it to pick up over the next couple days. And then lastly here, we're going to talk about some trade rumors. Now, we'll start with the Winnipeg Jets. I know we've talked about the Jets a lot this week, but teams like the Jets, Flames, and Flyers in particular, I think are going to be teams that we're going to be discussing quite a lot this week, as these three teams have some big players who they could definitely move. So we'll start with the Winnipeg Jets. There's been a couple of things with them. First with Pierre-Luc Dubois. Elliot Friedman on his recent 32 Thoughts podcast said that Dubois is most likely going to narrow his trade list down to 2 or 3 teams. And it sounds like Dubois trade could be getting close and could be happening in the not too distant future. Dubois is a solid top 6 center. There's been a lot of teams linked to him. LA's been picking up steam over the last couple of weeks. We know he wants to go to Montreal either now or via free agency as early as next year. So we know that Dubois is definitely going to be moved. It's just a matter of where and when. Once again, Elliot Friedman did make a good point. The Senators took Alex DeBrincat to arbitration. The Devils took Maya to arbitration to give them some more time to work out, for Maya to work out contract extension, for DeBrincat to be traded. The Jets didn't take Dubois to salary arbitration. So it sounds like there could be a deal imminent because he'll be due his qualifying offer on July 1st. And I don't think the Jets are really wanting to do that. So it sounds like he'll be dealt at some point before Saturday next week. So it definitely sounds like there's going to be a Dubois trade not just in future. And if he lists his teams down to 2 or 3 over the weekend, it sounds like there's a very strong chance maybe early next week Dubois could be dealt. So definitely something to keep our eye on, as it sounds like Dubois trade could be coming to a head in the not just in future. And then with Blake Wheeler, there's been multiple reports I've seen out that say that Wheeler will either be traded or possibly even bought out this week. It sounds like it's definitely going to happen. There was a lot of talk last year that Wheeler would be moved at some point. It never happened. He played it last year with the Jets, and it seems like this could be his final days with the Jets. Once again, I still think it's possible to get a trade done. The cap hit is not overly great for Wheeler, but I still think that the Jets can maybe make something work, whether it's retaining salary or taking a contract back to make it work. But I still think they could find a trade for Wheeler. But there is a possibility out there that if Wheeler can't find a trade he likes, or if the Jets don't find a trade they like, that the Jets could go the route of a buyout. Now, given the fact Wheeler's going to be entering the final year of his deal, the buyout will only be on their books for 2 years, so I don't think it'll be too worrisome for them, and Wheeler will become a unrestricted free agent. So I definitely still think it's most likely that we see a trade, but it does sound like a buyout is not out of the realm of possibility. And if there is no takers for Wheeler who want to take on his high cap hit for the next year, it's quite possible that if there's no trades, possibly by like Thursday or Friday, then it's likely he gets bought out. So definitely I think it's a possibility, and it's definitely another situation we have to watch with the Jets over the next little while. Is it sounds like Wheeler will either be dealt in the next couple of days, or if he can't find a trade, it will be a buyout for him. So it sounds like a couple of key Jets and Wheeler and Dubois could be entering their final week in Winnipeg and could be in new places at the start of next week. So definitely interesting to see, but it sounds like both of these two players are going to be gone in the not too distant future. Next is the Florida Panthers. There was some talk on the most recent TSN Insider trading video from Pierre LeBrun that the Panthers are going to be looking for some D and could use a forward to trade it. Now, I said this during my offseason preview a week ago for the Florida Panthers, that the Panthers, if healthy, would need a defenseman. They still have a top 4 hole in that team. They're a decent team, but once again, they did not do overly well after losing Uyghur and Sherratt last offseason. So going out, getting a top 4 defenseman would really help that team. But what I didn't take into consideration was the fact that both Aaron Ekblad and Brandon Montour are going to be out to start the season due to injuries. They both suffered significant injuries in the playoffs on their way to the Stanley Cup final, and both are most likely going to miss the start of next season. So not having 2 of their top 3 defensemen to start the next season is going to be a big blow for the Florida Panthers. So there's even more urgency now to try and find a defenseman who can help them, especially at the start of the season. So there's a lot of speculation that they could be looking for a ton of defensemen. LeBron said that to get a defenseman, they may be willing to move a guy like Anthony Duclair. He said it's not something that they really want to do, but Duclair is making $3 million. He's a really good speedy winger, and it sounds like, given their forward depth and the good prospect they have at the forward group, they'll be willing to move Duclair if it was to help them get some defensive help. So Duclair's making 1 year left, $3 million. I've already mentioned in that last week's video for Florida that they could move him or Reinhart to free up cap space and help them in other areas of need. So I definitely do think Duclair could be a player who gets moved. And he did link a guy like Noah Hanafin to Florida, who could be a good fit there. Definitely, it sounds like Hanafin could be a good fit there. The contracts aren't the same, but they're similar enough that I think they could possibly do like a Hanafin Duclair. It wouldn't be 1-for-1, but it's quite possible that we could see something like that, where Duclair goes to Calgary as a part of a package for Hanafin. But it definitely seems like the Panthers are focused on trying to improve that blue line, and if they can get some short-term help who can help them, especially early on in the season when they don't have Ekblad or Montour, that'd be a really big win for them. So definitely, Ekblad and Montour are not going to be healthy to start the season, and the Panthers are going to be looking for some trade options to bring in a couple of forwards, possibly at least one top 4 defenseman over the offseason, and they could look to move a guy like Anthony Duclair to make it work. So definitely something else to keep our eye on over the next couple of weeks. And finally, here is the Calgary Flames. Now, after I took my last video later in the afternoon on Thursday, there was a lot of talk from Frank Saravalli, who put out a couple of tweets saying that the Flames players are probably not going to sign. He first said that Elias Lindholm was offered a big contract extension, and that it sounds like he's not going to resign with the Flames. He then said that Backlund has also said that he's not going to talk contract extension and is going to play out the final year of his contract. He said that Toffoli's not going to resign. He said that it sounds like Tanev may not want to resign. We already know that Hanafin's probably not going to resign either. So there was a lot of talk about a possible mass exodus in Calgary over the next couple of weeks. Then on TSN's Insider Trading a couple of hours later, there was definitely some more talks about the Flames and what they could do. They said that Hanafin is most likely going to be gone. He does not want to sign a contract extension. He most likely wants to go back to the U.S., so he will possibly be dealt at some point in this offseason. It sounds like Toffoli's been made available. Elliot Friedman even tweeted this out. So that's 2 key guys. Toffoli was definitely a solid contributing piece for the Calgary Flames this past year, so to see him possibly leave via a trade is not great, but it sounds like the Flames have made him available, and they could trade him in the not just in the future. They said it sounds like Lindholm is still mulling over his options. The Flames and Lindholm have been talking some contract extensions, but it's not a guarantee that Lindholm's going to be moved, and he hasn't completely ruled out being back with Calgary, so we can't say that for sure. And then it sounds like Backlund wants to wait until the end of the season to talk contract extension and doesn't want to sign an extension at this point in time. So it sounds like Toffoli and Hanafin will be moved at some point for the Flames. It's possible Lindholm, it's not a guarantee as of yet. And then it could also be possible that Backlund could be moved. Elliot Friedman on the 32 Thoughts podcast last night did say that the Flames might be willing to offer Backlund the captaincy, but that they were really far apart on contract extensions. So it definitely does seem like Backlund could be another trade chip as well. Maybe Tanev and Zadorov as well, but it sounds like Hanafin and Toffoli are most likely going to be gone. Lindholm possible, it's still not 100% guaranteed. Backlund also possible, not 100% guaranteed. But it sounds like the Flames could have a lot of possible trades in the works right now. It sounds like Hanafin will be moved. It sounds like Toffoli will be moved. And if Lindholm and Backlund are moved, I think this team could go down the route of either a retool or a rebuild, because I don't see them being able to keep all these guys and keeping competitive. Because if they trade them, I'm pretty sure that they won't be as competitive as they were over the last couple of years. So definitely, it's going to be interesting to see. But expect the Flames to possibly move a ton of players over the next week, and if they can move one before the draft to give them a first-round pick, I wouldn't be surprised if they're willing to do it. So definitely interesting to see. But as we know, the Flames are either going to re-sign or move the players who enter in the final year of their contracts, and it just sounds as of right now that there's not a ton of players who want to re-sign. So definitely could see a lot of trades out the Calgary Flames organization. And like I said, the Flames, the Jets, and the Flyers are 3 teams I could definitely see a ton of action over the next week with how many trades they could have in the works. But definitely, I'd love to hear your comments down below. Does Wheeler wind up getting bought out or traded by the Jets? Love to hear your opinion on that. where's the most likely landing spot for Pierre-Luc Dubois to go? What sort of defenseman do you think the Panthers can go and target? And do they have to move a guy like Anthony Duclair to do it? And which Flames do you think will be moved? Will it be Toffoli? Will it be Hanafin? Will it be Lindholm? Will it be Backlund? Will it be Tanev? Or will it be multiple of these guys? Definitely love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. And if there is a couple of players who you think could be moved from Calgary, which team do you think fits the player the best? And what sort of trade package would you give? Definitely love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. But that's all I'm going to talk about for today. Once again, remember to like this video, and if you really liked it, subscribe down below. Once again, stay tuned for the Wednesday draft video I'll be doing at 4 o'clock Pacific time, 7 o'clock Eastern time. So definitely remember to check that out on Wednesday, as I'll be giving you my live opinion on all the stuff that happens through the first round of the draft. I also do a blog. Once again, I talk about draft stuff, trade rumors, off-season rumors, news. I talk about all that stuff over there. So definitely check that out. I'll link to that in the description below. And I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.